Hello, and welcome to another edition of Humble Theology. My name is John, and we are still looking at the Westminster Confession of Faith. We are in chapter 5, looking at God's providence over all things, and today we're in section 2. So in section 1, when we reviewed that, basically just quick review, section 1 told us that God, as the creator of all things, He governs all things in their actions. Nothing happens outside of His will. So everything falls under God's providence. When we say He is absolute, or that He's the authority on all things, then that's it. He's the only one who is all-powerful, all-knowing, all that kind of stuff. So please go back and look at section 1 of chapter 5 to catch up kind of on what we talked about there. So we're going to build on that here in section 2. Section 2 says, although in relation to the foreknowledge and decree of God, the first cause, all things come to pass immutably and infallibly, yet by the same providence He ordereth them to fall out, according to the nature of second causes, either necessarily, freely, or contingently. So there's a lot going on there, because when in premise 1, in section 1, when we said, well, God's in control of all things. He orders all things, gave structure and order, like ordering a pizza, but set in order, like lining up dominoes, so to say. When He sets up all these things, you have to almost immediately stop and ask, and philosophers have over the years and centuries. So, well, then what about the problem of evil? Is God responsible for evil? He's a God of love. He's a good God. But where did evil come from then? If in the first premise we said He's in control of all things. That's where here in the second premise, the church fathers basically outlined what we call here this nature of second causes. So God is the first cause of all things. Well, what do we mean by that? So He is creator. Everything originates from Him. But if I create something, say I build something, and it ends up being used for the wrong purpose, well, then is that purpose something that's my fault? No, that's a human analogy, so that's flawed, because I should have, if I were God, I should have known of all the potential possibilities of its use or what I created. But what this is trying to say is that basically God is not the author of sin. That comes from the creature. Really, you want to look at that as angels or men or both. But in their fallenness as holy creatures, when God created them, He created all things good. So how did sin get into the world? Well, by those things, those creatures, men and angels, using the freedom granted them to go against God, and therefore in the second cause type of methodology, they sinned. But we have to be careful, because although we ascribe sin to men and angels, we can't take away from it that God is the first cause. So what do we mean by enjoining these two things? Well, first, that God gave life to all things. 2, men and angels as the second cause took the life given them and decided to sin and go against God. But yet, going back to God as the first cause, He couldn't have not known about it, and it's much more than just bare permission. In other words, it can't happen by accident. If in the first section that we did last time, section 1 of chapter 5, that everything is according to His will, foreknowledge, all that stuff, He knew this would happen. And more than just giving it a bare, yes, go ahead, permission, it's part of His plan. Now, you'd have to, obviously, within a philosophical manner, go, well, why and how in the world would he allow sin, this great evils in the world? Why would that be part of his plan? Why would that be part of the way things unfold? And to be honest, we can't answer that. We're not given that answer. We're not given that why answer. We know that all things in the end work to his glory, both the destruction of the wicked and the salvation of his people. So in those two things, God is glorified. Now, to what manner he chose to have it, creation, fall, redemption, and all that play out, that's up to him. He's the one who's God. But that, one, shouldn't cause us to call into question his love and greatness. But then two, we can't belittle that and say, well, he just doesn't keep up with mankind the way he should. And as a master chess player, he didn't see man making this move. Or he knew man had the potential to sin and fall, but so he structured all these other things. No, he not only knew man would do it, but it was part of his plan all along. And that's where, when you take a serious stance on providence, when we looked at section 1, when you say and try to answer the question, is God ultimately in control of all things? It's easy to say, well, yes, of course he is. But then you bring in the problem of evil, and it gets a little muddled. And again, that's why this concept is before us of second causes. God is not the author of sin. That comes from the twisting of what was good by men and angels. Pride, whatever caused the first sin in Satan to fall, and then to one attempt Adam and Eve to sin, and then they sin, so forth, so on. We're sinning even today as we speak, and all that we do all around the world, there's just sin all around us and in us. Well, that is and must be part of God's plan, the work of redemption, all of it. We can't ascribe any of it to just say, well, God just kind of knew it would happen, but he didn't want it to happen. So we have to be careful with our choice of words on how we ascribe glory and honor to God and his providence, and yet not making it that he's some evil warmonger who brought this thing out for, kicks, or that he's not really a God of love and justice, that, he brought out evil. No, we have to go where Scripture goes, and because it is the revelation of God concerning him and his providence, that he made all things good, made all things well, and all things had the true and real potential of staying holy and righteous. But that we have to attribute that even in man's fall, in mankind's sin, in Adam's sin, leading the rest of the world into original sin, it's part of God's plan. He has a good purpose for it, good reasons for it. We, as the creation, we can't demand that answer from him. We can try to ask someday, hey, why this, why that? But would we ever really be able to comprehend the mind of God? Probably not. It's probably a labyrinth that Calvin and others, so that's a labyrinth you can't possibly get into, because you would never escape the mind of God. There's just no way the creature can comprehend the Creator that way. Well, there's more to build on this. This is only section 2. We have all the way through, 7 sections in chapter 5 on providence. So we have more to go, 5 more to build on. So God is in control of all things providentially, and within that, the fall is included, and yet we ascribe the sin and evilness of the fall to what we call second causes. Creation itself brought that upon itself in its fall. So that's it for this time. Stay tuned for more to come. Should get interesting. Take care. God bless. See you next time.